Nothing can exist without having built the relationship first. That is the key. And having that relationship and exploring a passion with somebody is what enables you to get somewhere. So for me, that's always the number one key thing. The fact that in my world that manifests itself through a theatrical space and through an event space is just its manifestation. But ultimately, for me, it always comes back to the relationship. Well, I'm glad you didn't say fear, because I really don't do fear. Greatest challenge, I think the greatest challenge that we always have going forward, yesterday, tomorrow, right now sometimes, is actually dealing with, more often than not, government processes, I think, are the greatest challenge. They can be quite unwieldy, and often I don't think we spend the time, for whatever the reasons are, and there would be legitimate reasons, but we don't spend the time to actually revisit sometimes some of the legislations that occur around certain spaces, and as a result we end up with this very heavy loaded process system. And often I am faced with having to go in and deal with these heavy process systems and actually start to unpack them again and actually go back and challenge them, which is always a lot of work, because you are having to go back in and justify why things should be looked at differently. But in the process of doing that, one hopes that once you have come through it, that you actually have made a future system much easier. So for me, in doing what I do, that is often the greatest challenge. A creative placemaker, in the context of when we are working in the event scope, we are actually creating place. We are often working in public domain, where we are trying to engage community, and not even trying to, need to engage community, because without the community's involvement and the community's engagement and ownership over what is being created, what you're creating is pointless. So for us, that is in essence creative placemaking, is ensuring that connection happens, and then where that connection leads to is also in itself an interesting story. I think to this day, I have a few. I think my greatest moment, I'm going to share two. I think my two greatest moments. One was Sydney Olympics 2000, opening ceremony, and the electricity in the stadium when the cauldron paused. The electricity in the stadium that day was a tangible thing. It wasn't a feeling, it was tangible. I could have held it in my hands, and I think I did. That was an incredible moment that came after an incredible journey with a group of wonderful people who were pushed to complete limits. To have actually delivered it and gotten it there, and at the end, at the level we did, came with incredible amounts of pain, of birthing almost. I often think that what we do is a bit like birthing. I think that is one of my proud-based moments. I think the other great moment that I've always loved, for many years I was the art director of Sydney New Year's Eve, and during my time on that event, the one moment that always captured me and still captures me when I go down to the harbour today is the countdown from 10 to 0. So that moment where we go from this year to next year, there is this moment where the entire harbour, which will have anything in excess of 1.5 million people who are waiting for this midnight pyrotechnic show to explode colour in front of them and welcome in the new year, there is this moment on 0 where 1.5 million people collectively sigh in. And that moment for me is a moment of awe, a moment of magic, and ultimately a moment of peace. So to have been involved in helping to create that moment, for me is also another great thing that I always sort of touches me.